Hey there, multi-prep teachers. You know how professional development never seems to quite get to what we need? It's like, great idea, but how do I make this work when I have 3+ preps to juggle? That's exactly why I created the Simplify Your Preps Collective. It's a free Facebook group built just for teachers like you, where we share tips, resources, and real talk about making multi-prep teaching less overwhelming and more doable. Sound like your kind of space? Head to kristenmasick.com/collective and join us today. Let's simplify together. Welcome to this week's Ask Me Anything, where you can ask me anything about CTE, teaching multiple preps, being a mom, secondary teaching, being an administrator, whatever you want to ask. It is a free game. This is the second episode for the week, and it is only during the summer. If you have a question, feel free to send me an email at hello@kristenmasick.com or a DM on Instagram at kristenmasick, KRISTENMASSIC. Welcome to the Secondary Teacher Podcast, the podcast for middle and high school teachers juggling multiple preps to get the strategies to reduce overwhelm so that you don't have to choose between being an effective teacher and prioritizing important relationships. I'm your host, Kristen Masick, a 10-year high school engineering teacher, former middle school assistant principal, and teacher coach. Every week, we will discuss strategies, systems, and time-saving tips to help you not only survive but thrive as a multiple prep teacher. Today's question comes from Kirsten, and she asks, what suggestions do you have for clear, lightweight storage for documents, binders, and other classroom supplies? I'd like to store extra paper copies of graphic organizers, rubrics, etc. that I'll use next year, along with binders and objects. I'd like to find a container that ideally has drawers and can be easily moved and clearly labeled. Here are some thoughts I have when it comes to these kinds of storage containers. My favorite are the ones that have the drawers, and usually when it starts to become back to school, it's that back to college time is when a lot of these things start showing up in big box stores like Walmart. And they have the drawers, and a lot of times they'll have the casters on the bottom that you can actually take off or not use. Those are my favorite because they are pretty good size drawers. And I believe the ones that I have, they have 3 big, deep, they're probably 6 to 8 inches deep because I like to drop things. And then the other thing that I like about those drawer systems myself is that they are clear, so you can see into them. That's always a very important thing. And then I can easily add my labels to them rather than the word itself. You can still add the word, but using a little label maker never has worked out for me as far as getting students to actually put things away. And so if you can take a picture of what's inside, or if you can have a vinyl cutout or something that goes on the outside so that that graphic is on there, will really make it so that you can put things away easier and your students can. The other thing is I had mentioned the deep drawers, and not so that you can fit a bunch in there, although that is nice, but so that you can drop things in. I find that actually filing things takes me forever because more often than not, I'll just drop it anyways instead of going through it and coming up with the files and having the labels and putting them all in the right places. That also can be cumbersome. Now, going back to your original question, I would kind of think about whether or not you actually want to save copies for the following year. I know that when I had distributed copies to students and I would try to collect them, even for the next class period, a lot of times they were gross. I don't know why, because their hands were dirty or they draw on them or write on them something. Consider whether or not you really feel like that is worth it. If that is something that you really, really, really would love to do so that you can save paper and you don't have to make the copies, I would suggest having page protectors, which sometimes are difficult to find in stores now, but you can always find them online. But having page protectors and giving those out in page protectors instead of just giving students if you are doing that, then your idea of having a binder, and maybe you've got those copies, if you're planning on doing that, by unit or however many would fit. Maybe you just have a binder per class that you have or per subject. If you are teaching careers and architecture and engineering, whatever different class periods you are having, you could have a binder for each one of those. And then within that, it's up to you. You could have like sections where you have had each of the units, or you could just literally have them all in there in those page protectors. And then that way you can pop out those page protectors with the copies inside out every single time you need to use those. But for the most part, I would see what you could do to digitize those, because I think you're going to have an easier time having less clutter and less mess by having those digital, unless you are just really against having that digital. My other go-to, which sometimes can be good and sometimes can be cumbersome, are the milk crates. I like the milk crates that actually have the holes in the bottom. They do sell some that have a solid bottom, and what I find about those is they get really dirty. I would rather have things, and I guess it's good or bad depending on what you're storing in there, but you can store files in them. I also like that they can be lightweight and I can stack them on top of one another. I don't like to have a ton of them in my classroom, but I found that having them, and then I could put those in places like they were light enough, I wasn't putting a ton in there. I could put those above my cabinets and things so that I could still have a space. And the same thing as the binders, have one per class, but I would suggest try to get rid of as much as possible, because that is really going to help you just minimize, declutter, and de-stress your classroom. This idea of having a lot of clutter in your classrooms can lead to additional stress for you and your students is really a thing. But those are my suggestions when it comes to the types of organizational systems. The other final thing that I would like to say before I finish up this episode is try to store things vertically as much as possible. You could also have like a magazine rack where you have put things in there so that it's vertical, so it's not sitting on a desk or a tabletop or a counter, because that will take up a ton of space. If you are having something on a counter and it's still kind of like that paper, then I would suggest the magazine holders or the book holders that where they allow your papers or your things to stand up. You can get those really cheaply pretty much anywhere. They'll sell like the cardboard ones, IKEA. Those also work, and so then you can drop in papers and have those vertically instead of horizontally. If you have a question, and pretty much any question is free game. It could be related to teaching multiple preps. It could be organization. It could be about being an administrator, or even CTE, or being a mother and trying to fit everything in. Make sure that you send me that question. It can be either via email or on Instagram. It's where I hang out the most. hello@kristenmassick.com, or on Instagram @kristenmassick, KristenMassick. Until next week.